Hey everybody, this is Sam Knight. I'm a Platinum Product Expert for Google Business Profile, and today we're going to be talking about reviews, specifically how to report Google reviews, how to remove Google reviews, and just some tips I have around Google's policies to give you a better chance of success when you're reporting a review. I've reported thousands in my career, whether it's on the Google Business Profile Help community or just with my own clients. And so I'm just going to give some tips that I've gained over the years of understanding Google's policies and how they enforce those policies and how to appeal a review. A lot of merchants don't even realize that there's an appeal form for reviews. So we'll kind of dive into some of the guidelines and to show you what you can include in your appeal and how to submit that appeal. So the biggest thing is you got to be aware of Google's review management tool. And if you are a business owner that has a Google Business Profile, you have access to this tool. It's the best way to report reviews. You can report reviews directly from Google search or from your profile by clicking on the review and reporting it. But I usually recommend just coming straight to the review management tool because this is where you can just keep tabs of its status and where it is in the process of reporting your review. There's kind of multiple stages, which we'll go through. And ultimately, this is where you can submit an appeal. And I almost always submit an appeal. Not always. Sometimes reviews taken down right away, but more often than not, I ultimately do have to submit an appeal. And you can do that within this tool. So when you get here, you want to check the status of your appeal. And the biggest questions that I see is the decision pending. You'll see that under decision. You might see escalated, check email for updates, or decision pending. And sometimes this decision pending, it can stay like that for a while. And you might see it for days, weeks, months go by. It still says decision pending. You might be thinking, what gives? What's going on? Is this going anywhere? In my experience, no, it's probably not going anywhere. That's why you should submit an appeal, which that's my pretty much biggest tip in this video probably, is that you can actually submit an appeal while the decision is pending. And so that's how you get it to this escalated status. A lot of merchants will come to the help community and say, hey, can you escalate this review? Well, have you tried escalating it yourself first? Because you actually can. And as long as it's been 3 days, you can escalate it. And I always recommend doing this. There's really no benefit in waiting. I would wait 3 days, and as soon as it becomes eligible for appeal, I recommend submitting an appeal to escalate it. That's where you can kind of give some of your reasoning around why it's a violation and any evidence if you have any. So definitely come here 3 days after you report the review. And it's kind of easy to miss, but down here you'll see check reviews not eligible for appeal or appeal eligible reviews. So you will select appeal eligible reviews and continue. So on this page, this is where you will select those you want to appeal. And this is where my next tip comes in, specifically for review attack situations. Say you have a customer who left more than one review, them and their friends, they went and recruited all their friends to come leave bad reviews for your business because they are angry. So that is against Google's policies. Each review should reflect that individual's experience with the business. And it shouldn't be like a coordinated attack to manipulate ratings and so on. But what can happen is when you report a review, and it's, I don't know if this is 100% the case, but my experience, it seems to be, is you report a review and Google kind of evaluates it one by one. So a review by itself might not look like a violation, but if you're saying, no, I'm not reporting this one review, I'm reporting these 5 reviews as the same violation, which is that they're all the same. And the best way to do that is in this tool, you can select up to 10 reviews. So say you suspect 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 are the same individual. You should just select all 10 of those, and then you can submit one appeal form for all of those reviews. So as basically as one report. So that's real important. But for this sake, we're just going to report one. So we'll select this one, decisions pending, 1-star review, and click continue. And your find yourself on yet another screen, easy to miss. It looks like you're at the end of the road because that continue button has disappeared. But there's actually this little button over here that you don't want to miss, because this is how you get to the appeal form. So you will want to click that and it will open up in a new tab, and that will actually have the form to submit the appeal. So this is what the actual appeal form looks like, where you can first, you have to name the policy, then describe why it's a violation, and you can also attach proof. And so I highly recommend going through the policies, because you'll want to, in that appeal form, you need to put the exact name of the policy that you are alleging. And one of the biggest things is this very first one, fake engagement, a big misunderstanding with clients, and just things I see on the forum as well, as you see a review come in and immediately say, this wasn't a customer. They didn't buy anything from me. And then many a business owner are upset when Google refuses to take it down. And the reason for that is it's not one of Google's guidelines or policies that you have to be a customer. So I'll repeat myself there. You do not need to be a customer to leave a review. That is not Google's policy. Google's policy is that you should have had an experience with a business. So an experience, that's way more broad than being a paying customer. So an experience might be someone calls you during your open business hours, no one picks up the phone, or no one calls them back. That's an experience. So they would be eligible to leave a review. And the issue is maybe you say, oh, I don't even know this person. They're not in my booking system or my CRM or whatever. Well, if they called you and no one picked up the phone, then you wouldn't know that that experience ever occurred, and you wouldn't know who it was. And so you wouldn't have any record of that person having that experience, most likely. The other issue is that many people use screen names or kind of aliases on their Google account. So the name on the review may not be their real name. So even if they were a paying customer, their screen name might be something that's just not their real name. And so you wouldn't be able to match it up with who that is exactly. And so that first policy here, fake engagement, is often the most difficult thing and one of the worst policies to try to argue with Google, because it's virtually impossible to prove. So while it is one of Google's policies, it is very, very, very hard to prove that something actually was fake engagement, or that they never had an experience with your business. So I would recommend avoiding, this policy accusation, or the claim that this is the policy being broken, because you probably can't prove it. And in my experience, Google's really only taking down reviews that are obviously violations. So your better bet would be looking if within that review there is something else that might give you a better chance of, a better line of argument for that particular review. So we can look at some of these others. Misinformation. Really, there's some misunderstandings here around this as well. I've heard business owners say, "Oh, well, they said in the review that this happened, but that didn't actually happen." So that's not what Google defines as misinformation. It's actually in their guidelines that they don't enter disputes with business owners and reviewers of the details of facts of a particular experience, like who said what or what actually happened. They're not going to send an investigation team to get to the bottom of what really happened during an experience that resulted in a review. So that's not what they mean by misinformation. What they mean is content that might be harmful to somebody else on Google. So say you're a doctor's office and someone leaves a review, and maybe in the review they talk about a medication and say you're not supposed to, prescribe that for this and that, and it's not a fair or something. I don't know, I'm just making something up. And it's factually inaccurate. It's verifiably inaccurate. It's just medical misinformation. So those types of things can be harmful to other people on Google who may see it. So that's a misinformation claim that might be my experience, more likely to be enforced. And so you would explain that. So you would put that, you would say misinformation, harmful content that has deceptive or misleading health information. You literally copy that and put it here. So you want to put the name of the policy. That's what you put there. And then here is where you explain the reasoning. So you might explain that, like the reviewer said this medication was for this, or that it's illegal, or that it can cause some sort of crazy side effect. That's not true. You can explain that here. That would be a pretty solid line of reasoning. If there's a violation there, that's going to have better success than something like, oh, I don't know this person. Well, how does Google know you don't know that person? So they don't really, in my experience, take your word for it. So you really want to find, kind of put your lawyer hat on in a sense, and dig through these policies and think what it could be in here that is not allowed to be on Google. Whether that's a lot of stuff like hate speech and very offensive stuff, Google takes down right away. They might not even publish, but there are a lot of things that might get published that are a violation that you should report, and that you'll have a case. And by using this appeal form, you'll have much better success. One of those is like unsubstantiated allegations of unethical behavior or criminal wrongdoing. This is one that I've used quite a bit and found it to be effective. It basically is the reviewer alleging your business of something that's unethical or possibly criminal. Google will remove a lot of reviews like that. So look in the review if there's something like that, if there's some sort of allegation, and then you'll explain here. And really, you want to, in this field here, it's really important, but you don't want to use this to plead or beg or anything. What works best for me is kind of, almost kindergarten level, explaining it like you would to a toddler of why this is a violation. I'll even put definitions of words. You have to understand that a lot of the team at Google that might be reviewing this are international, and they might be in different countries and not in your region, or English or whatever language your review is in might not be their first language. And so it's really helpful to really keep black and white as simple as you can, and to the facts, definitions of words, why it's a violation. Obscenity and profanity, that's another example of this exact idea of, in some regions, a certain slang word, it might exist where it doesn't somewhere else. And in that region, it's obscene or offensive, it might be offensive to somebody. So that's a good thing to explain here. So really, what's going to give you the most success is a line of argument that is showing why this review is harmful to other Google users. Rather than saying this review is harmful to my business and it's just harmful to me and it's not fair, that's going to be a less successful avenue. What's more successful is, how does this content, because that's what a review is, it's content on Google. So how is this content on Google, how is it going to negatively affect other people? So anyone who may read the review, how is it going to affect them? Is it going to offend them? Is it going to lead them astray? Is this helpful content? Rather than keeping it focused on yourself and how it's not fair to you or your business, think about, how could this not be fair to other Google users? That's going to give you better success in this field here. Another one is, so it goes along with fake engagement, where this might be successful, say a competitor. So post content on a competitor's place to undermine that business, products, or reputation. So that's a conflict of interest. But again, Google, in my experience, is not going to just take your word for it. So it needs to have evidence. And again, a lot of people use screen names and aliases on their Google account. So even if it's a competitor, it might not be obvious to a third party. Like Google is looking at it and say, how do we know this is a competitor? So look at the reviewer name. Does that reviewer name match competitor's LinkedIn profile? Does it match their website, their staff section on their website, where there they are, that same reviewer name on their website, and they're in your market providing the same types of services? Then that could give you a case. So you'll explain that in that field in the form, and then put evidence. Take a screenshot of the website, take a screenshot of their LinkedIn page, or put a link to their LinkedIn page, link to their website. Give Google as much evidence as you can around that review, because this is pretty much your best shot, is this appeal form. Another commonly overlooked policy is unclear and repetitive content. So say a review is really long and it's kind of rambling and hard to understand, or there's a bunch of typos, misspelled words. It's just kind of ugly, for lack of a better term. Again, think about it as content on Google. So is this content helpful to Google? Is it helpful to other users? If it's kind of a rambling, unclear review, then you can report it under unclear content, repetitive content. Another one that you might have success with is off topic. So say someone left a review for the wrong business. So Google might not know. Maybe it's an abbreviation or a short name for a local business, and it might be hard to draw the connection at first glance. So take screenshots of the other business and the URL, or whatever proof you can show that the review, if they mention that business's name in the review, or their short name or something that ties it to say, hey, Google, this is not a review for my business. They meant to leave this review for somebody else. You would report that as off topic and try to put that evidence or screenshots here in the appeal form. Another often missed one, personal information. So you actually cannot leave a full name or last name of an employee at the business in a review unless it's their publicly facing name. So say like a lawyer, a lot of times their law firm might be their full name. But for other types of businesses, most other types of businesses, you can't put a staff member's full name in a review, or their last name, like say someone working at the register, or just someone in the store. If they're sharing personal information, personal identifiable information in the review, Google will often take that down, and it might slip through the cracks. So that's a good type of review to submit an appeal for. So that's probably my best tips. A lot of these other things in here are often caught, violence and, super offensive stuff and curse words. A lot of times those are caught right away and they might not publish, but these are some of the big ones that you might see on your profile that might not be as easy to remove unless you clearly explain it in an appeal and put evidence in the appeal. So that's the biggest thing. Submit an appeal. As soon as it's 3 days, go and submit an appeal form. And be sure to study these policies and get familiar with them. This is what's going to arm you with your best shot at removing a Google review. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any other questions or even suggestions for other videos, questions about Google Business Profile, always appreciate ideas on what other videos you all might find helpful. Thanks.